The laughter echoed through the grand marble hall like a slap. It was the kind of laughter that rich people used when they believed the world belonged to them, loud, careless, and sharp enough to cut through anyone standing below them. Crystal chandeliers glittered above the ballroom, reflecting light across polished floors and expensive suites. Champagne glasses clinked, musicians played softly in the corner, and the city's most powerful people gathered for the charity gala of the year. And in the middle of it all stood a maid holding a tray of drinks. Her name was Elena. She wore the simple black and white uniform of the hotel staff, her dark hair tied neatly into a bun, her eyes lowered politely as she moved quietly among the guests. To most people in that room, she was invisible. Just another worker hired to serve the wealthy. But then the millionaire noticed her. Alexander Laurent was famous not only for his billions but also for his arrogance. Tall, handsome, and dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he was surrounded by investors, models, and politicians who laughed at every word he said. His confidence bordered on cruelty, and tonight, after several glasses of champagne, that cruelty found a target. Elena. Alexander watched her as she walked past, balancing the tray with quiet grace. Something about her calm composure irritated him. She didn't seem intimidated like the other staff. She simply did her job, silently. So he decided to entertain his guests. He snapped his fingers, and Elena politely stopped beside him. The crowd around him watched with curious smiles, already expecting a spectacle. Alexander leaned back in his chair, swirling the champagne in his glass. His lips curved into a mocking grin as he looked at her simple uniform. Then he said the words that would later haunt him. "Dance the tango for us," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And I might just marry you." Laughter exploded around the table. Some guests covered their mouths, others leaned forward eagerly. A few looked uncomfortable but said nothing. For them, humiliating someone like Elena was simply another form of entertainment. Elena stood still. Her hands tightened slightly around the tray. For a brief moment, her eyes lifted and met Alexander's. And in that moment, something strange happened. There was no anger in her gaze. No embarrassment. Only a quiet, unreadable sadness. If you believe that kindness matters more than money, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. The music from the orchestra floated through the room, a soft tango melody played for the elegant couples on the dance floor. Alexander raised his eyebrows, waiting. The crowd waited too. And then something unexpected happened. Elena gently placed the tray of glasses onto a nearby table. The room grew quieter. Slowly, she stepped forward onto the open space of the ballroom floor. At first, the guests thought she was simply playing along with the joke. Some laughed again, expecting an awkward performance from a nervous maid. But the moment the music reached the dramatic rhythm of the tango, Elena moved. And suddenly, the entire ballroom went silent. Her posture changed completely. Her back straightened, her chin lifted, and every step she took carried elegance and control. Her movements were powerful yet graceful, each turn perfectly aligned with the rhythm of the music. This wasn't the clumsy dancing of someone trying to entertain rich strangers. This was mastery. The musicians themselves looked surprised and began playing with more energy, sensing something extraordinary unfolding in front of them. Elena's feet glided across the marble floor with breathtaking precision. Her arms moved with emotion, telling a story of passion, struggle, and resilience through every motion. Guests who had been laughing moments earlier now stared in stunned silence. Alexander slowly lowered his glass. The confident smirk faded from his face. Because what he was watching made no sense. This woman, a hotel maid, was dancing like someone who had spent a lifetime mastering the art. When the final note of the tango echoed through the hall, Elena finished with a sharp, elegant turn and a graceful pause. The silence lasted 2 seconds. Then the room erupted into applause. But Elena didn't smile. She simply bowed politely, picked up the tray again, and walked back toward the staff entrance as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Alexander sat frozen. Something deep inside him had shifted. For the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity. Later that night, after the guests had left and the ballroom was nearly empty, Alexander found himself wandering through the quiet corridors of the hotel. He wasn't entirely sure why he was searching. But eventually, he found her. Elena was in the service hallway, quietly folding tablecloths with the rest of the staff. When she saw him approaching, the other workers quickly stepped aside, nervous around someone of his status. But Elena remained calm. Alexander stood there awkwardly for a moment, unsure how to begin. The arrogance he carried so easily earlier now felt strangely heavy. He asked the manager about her the next day. What he learned shocked him. Elena had once been one of the most promising tango dancers in Europe. Years ago, she had trained at one of the most prestigious dance academies. Critics had predicted she would become a global star. Her performances were breathtaking, her technique flawless. Then tragedy struck. Her father became seriously ill. Medical bills piled up, and Elena abandoned her career to care for him. When he passed away, the debts remained, forcing her to take any job she could find just to survive. Including working as a maid in a luxury hotel where people like Alexander barely noticed her existence. When Alexander heard the full story, something inside him twisted with guilt. The memory of his cruel joke replayed in his mind. For the first time in years, the billionaire who could buy almost anything realized he had treated someone truly extraordinary as if she were nothing. Days passed, but Alexander couldn't forget her dance. He began visiting the hotel more often, pretending to attend meetings or events. In truth, he was hoping to see Elena again. One evening he found her cleaning the ballroom after another event. The room was empty except for the soft echo of music playing from the speakers as she wiped the polished floor. And then he saw something that stunned him again. Elena was dancing. Not for anyone. Not for applause. Just for herself. Her movements were softer now, filled with emotion rather than performance. It was the dance of someone remembering who they once were. Alexander stood quietly in the doorway, watching. And for the first time in his life, the billionaire felt small. Because in that empty ballroom, the maid who had lost everything still carried more grace, passion, and dignity than anyone he had ever known. Something changed in him that night. Not because she impressed him, but because she reminded him of the person he used to be before money hardened his heart. In the weeks that followed, Alexander made a decision that surprised everyone around him. He began funding a cultural foundation for young dancers who could not afford training. But he did something even more unexpected. He asked Elena to lead it. At first she refused. Years of hardship had taught her not to trust the promises of powerful men. But Alexander didn't push. Instead, he simply showed up again and again, proving through quiet actions that he was serious about giving others the chance she had lost. Slowly, Elena began to believe him. The dance foundation opened months later in a renovated theater downtown. Young students from poor families filled the studios, learning steps that once seemed impossible for them to reach. And every evening, when the last class ended, Elena would step onto the empty floor and dance again. Not because she had to, but because her story was finally changing. Alexander often sat quietly in the back row of the theater, watching the students train. The arrogant millionaire who once mocked a maid had slowly become someone else. Someone who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in money. It was measured in the lives you helped change. Years later, when journalists asked Alexander Laurent what inspired the foundation that transformed thousands of young dancers' lives, he always smiled quietly. And he would say only one sentence. The greatest investment I ever made started with a mistake. Before we reach the end of this story, we have a small request for you. Please comment the word kindness below if you believe a single moment of humility can change a person's life forever. Because sometimes the people we underestimate carry the most extraordinary stories. The night Alexander mocked Elena was meant to humiliate her. Instead, it revealed the truth about both of them. One had lost everything but kept her dignity. The other had everything but needed to rediscover his humanity. And somewhere between a cruel joke and a beautiful dance, two lives quietly changed forever. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can rewrite an entire life story.